Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Keith, and you're watching Barber's Auto Help. Thank you so much for watching. In this video, we're going to be going over a particular problem that the 2011 to 2016 Ford F150 3.5-liter Ecoboost may have. And while I still have yet to see this happen on a Ford Expedition, theoretically, this information can apply to the Ford Expedition from 2015 to 2017. And the symptom of this problem is a high-pitched kind of a screeching noise, and it usually happens upon heavy acceleration or revving the engine. We'll start out by actually listening to the noise first, and then we'll go into the cause of this noise and why it makes this noise. Then we'll go into how to check for the issue, and then, of course, the fix. Let's go ahead and get into it. So what I did right here is I taped my cell phone up underneath the hood of an F-150 that actually had this issue so that you could hear the sound while it's happening. And this sound is actually happening upon heavy acceleration. Now this is the cause of this noise. You can see that this exhaust stud on the rear of the exhaust manifold is broken. And as you're probably well aware of, on a turbocharged engine, whenever you're accelerating heavily, there's a lot of exhaust back pressure inside the exhaust manifold just before the turbo. And this vehicle is equipped with exhaust manifold gaskets that are multi-layered metal gaskets. And whenever the stud shears off in the rear of the exhaust manifold here, it allows a little bit of that back pressure to escape through that multi-layered metal gasket. And the gasket acts as sort of like a reed, per se. When the high-pressure exhaust gas goes through that metal gasket, causes it to vibrate, creating that high-pitched screech. Now, this issue seems to be somewhat of a common issue with the 2011 to 2016 F-150 with the 3.5-liter Ecoboost, and the issue can actually happen on either side of the engine, the right exhaust manifold or the left exhaust manifold. My theory is there's just too much stress back there for one exhaust stud. You can see that there's a good distance between the rear stud and the next stud over. So that stud has to keep it together back there all by itself. Now, if you hear this noise and you want to check this issue out yourself, you could definitely do that. It's not hard to do, but I would caution you, the exhaust gets extremely hot, so maybe let your car cool down for several hours before you get up underneath it or snoop around down there, because you could potentially get burned. But as you're looking up at the exhaust system from up underneath the vehicle here, you can see you got the transmission there, and then you got the exhaust pipe. You can look straight up at the back side of the engine, and usually you could see if that exhaust stud is broken right there. And the same goes for both sides of the engine there. You can just look up in the same spot on the exhaust manifold, and you should be able to see if that stud is broken. Now, if you don't want to get on your back and get up underneath the vehicle, you can also go through the wheel well, and you may have to use a mirror and a flashlight or a cell phone like I'm doing right here, and just kind of put it back there towards the back of the turbo and look at the exhaust manifold and see if that stud is broken as well. Pretty easy to check. Now, what is the fix for this? Of course, that depends on the situation. If you have a rear exhaust stud broke on just one side, my recommendation would be to replace the exhaust manifold and the gasket, including all new studs and nuts and all one-time use parts pertaining to the turbo removal and installation. Now, don't misunderstand me. You don't have to replace the turbo, but you are going to have to remove and install the turbo. So there are a lot of one-time use parts associated with that procedure, and you need to replace those parts because you don't want to go do this again. Of course, if you have studs broke on both sides of the engine, you would want to do that same procedure to the other side as well. And I'm sure that you noticed that this manifold doesn't quite look like the old one. This is an updated design by Ford. Now, you can also get an updated design by an aftermarket source. This particular exhaust manifold is from BD Diesel, and it seems to be pretty beefy. I don't think that any of these studs are going to break anytime soon. And of course, I'm sure there are other sources for updated manifolds for this particular engine. No matter what parts source you use, be sure you get updated exhaust manifolds. Updated exhaust manifolds utilize more exhaust studs and in different areas so that hopefully you won't have this problem again in the future. Now, one thing you'll notice on the driver's side when installing the updated exhaust manifold, you'll have a little bit of a hard time getting the shielding for the crankshaft position sensor wiring to fit correctly. You may have to tuck it up underneath the exhaust manifold just a bit, and I'm sorry I don't have any video or an example of how it's supposed to be tucked up underneath it, but it can be done. Now, replacing these exhaust manifolds can be a bit of a chore, and in my opinion, the best way to do this job is with the cab off. It's just so much better with the cab off. You're not killing your back, and it's much easier to do and to do a good job with the cab off. Now, you don't have to take the cab off. You can definitely do this from up underneath or through the wheel wells. It's just a pain in the butt. But if I had my way about it, I would definitely do it with the cab off every time. Now, I would say if you do take the cab off, I would go ahead and replace both exhaust manifolds regardless if you have a stud broke on both sides or not. And it's definitely a great idea to replace both the coolant delivery lines and the return lines going to both turbos. And when you replace the coolant lines, be sure to replace the coolant line quick disconnects, both on the turbos and on the engine. I would also suggest replacing the oil delivery lines and the return lines to both turbos as well, including the turbo oil filters. And of course, I would recommend replacing the coolant delivery and return lines and both of your oil lines and the oil filters, regardless if you take the cab off or not, to whichever side you're working on or both sides. Now, of course, I wouldn't recommend taking the cab off on the 2015 to 2017 Expedition. That'd be a little much. I'd go through the wheel wells and work from up underneath and on top. Folks, this is definitely something that I would highly advise you to have a repair manual to do and to do properly. As mentioned earlier, there are a lot of one-time use components that have to be changed out while you're in there, and you don't want to make a mistake in doing this job because it's an awfully big job. You want to go in one time, get it done, and be done with it for a good long bit before you have to do it again. Now, some of you may be wondering, well, what about the later model F-150s and the Expeditions? Does this information apply to those as well? I suppose it's possible that the newer models could have this issue. However, on the 2017 F-150 and on the 2018 Expedition and the newer models following those, the exhaust manifold has been redesigned, so it brings that rear exhaust stud in closer to the next one over, giving it more support back there. So in my opinion, it's not likely that this issue is actually going to happen on the newer vehicles. So folks, I sincerely hope that this video was a help to you. If it was, do me a favor and hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel. And as mentioned in all of my videos, please read the entire description down below this video. Before you apply any of this knowledge, there may be some things I need to clarify. That's where I do that. And please read the disclaimer at the very end of it. Special thanks to Chris Whitney from the Chris Whitney channel for providing the images for this video. Chris Whitney is a super talented technician with an up-and-coming channel. Please click the link in the description below to view his channel. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have a good one.